Right now. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 2nd, 2022 Planning, Economic Development and Housing Committee meeting tonight. I am Councilman James Sanchez and the chair of this committee. This evening, this meeting will be broadcasted live on HPA-TV, the Hartford Public Access Television, Xfinity Government Channel 96, and Frontier Government Channel 6032. It will also be streamed via hpat.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, and HPA-TV Apple TV, Amazon TV, and Roku TV app. It will also be made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. So right now, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues who are voting members, which is Councilman Nick LeBron. I have Councilwoman Tiana Hercules. I have Councilwoman Shirley Surgeon. I'm just looking through as a populated screen here. And I believe Councilwoman Marilyn Rossetti. Let me see who else. I'm pretty sure as they come along, I will be mentioning them. I'd like to also welcome our Corp Counsel, James Del Visco, Howard Rifkin, I think Attorney Vasello, and also our directors, I. Charles Matthews, Amy Chambers, and Michael Looney. If I miss anyone, my apologies. So we're going to get this meeting going. Moving on, and our first item on this agenda is 2.1, and it is the Mayor Bronin with a company resolution to confirm the appointment of Marion Ando Clark to the Central Regional Tourism District. Did I pronounce that right, Ando Clark?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Mrs. Clark, for attending this meeting to speak on this appointment, and I will yield the floor to you. If you can, please tell us about yourself, your interests. How do you plan to help and improve the tourism for the region, especially for the city of Hartford?
Hi, everyone. I'm again Marion Ando Clark. Currently, I am the Director of Small Business Development at the Hartford Chamber of Commerce. I've been in this position since the end of March into April. I have always been a Hartford advocate. I used to be the city's event manager. I came in with the Luke Bronin administration when they dissolved Mecca, and I helped reconfigure the events department in the city, how the city actually manages events currently. And I've always been an advocate of the city of Hartford. I advocate for tourism as it is. I actually had a meeting today with the Alliance on pushing more tourism and hospitality efforts to attract businesses, to attract employees to stay in Hartford after 5 p.m. I don't know what much else to say, but I'm open to take any questions about myself if anybody has any.
Yes. Yes, so I have a couple of questions, then I'll yield the floor to Councilwoman Rossetti. First of all, I want to thank you for having I'm not sure if you do, but I want to thank you for having the interest to serve on this committee for the tourism. And then my question to you is that, being that you're on the Chamber of Commerce and other organizations, this is going to require quite some time and dedication. And do you have that time?
I do have that time. From what I was told, they meet once a month. And I do have that time to dedicate to that, as well if there's any resources or anything that they need in the interim to help serve the board, I'm willing to do. I also sit on the board for First Night, and anything that I can do to support the expansion of Hartford's growth and economic growth, I'm about.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Rossetti?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, how are you? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I say this at every committee where someone is going to be appointed, and maybe my colleagues are tired of it, but I'm going to do it again. I really like to thank people for taking the time, energy, and effort to not only find a committee that's something that they're familiar with or passionate about, but taking the time, as my councilman, the chair, Councilman Sanchez, pointed out, because it does take time, and then it's just another thing in your life. But we wouldn't be able to have the wonderful committees and commissions that we have in the city of Hartford without folks like you. So I really thank you for taking the time to do that.
Thank you.
And Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, just want to also echo Councilman Rossetti. Thank you for Marion for volunteering to sit on that board. One of the things I will have to say about Marion, I've worked with her over the last year or so through the Chamber of Commerce. I think she's going to bring a great resource and a great asset from her background in special events and doing so many different things in the city. So from working with her for the last year or so, I think it's a great addition to the Regional Tourism Board, because I know she's going to bring lots of good stuff and lots of good ideas to the table, and also make Hartford very proud. So Marion, thank you so very much for volunteering and doing this.
Thank you, Councilman Surgeon.
Councilman LeBron.
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair. So I'll continue on the accolades. I work with Marion Ando on projects in Hartford, in particular the Movies in the Park projects, where she led an effort that was a bit challenging in bringing collaborative folks together and in a unified front in our approach after the dissolving of Mecca, which wasn't an easy task. So, you know, she, Ms. Ando Clark has that skill set. And I think that's a skill set that is needed in always in every advisory council, the ability to collaborate during the hardest circumstances. So thank you for your dedication to the city, Ms. Ando Clark.
Thank you, Councilman LeBron.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other of my colleagues would like to ask any questions or make any statements? Councilwoman Hercules.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just wanted to similarly say welcome to this commission and thank you for the work that you have done already across the city, especially with the Alliance. And I appreciated what you said about businesses and trying to attract businesses to stay open after 5 p.m. I have in my office has a special interest in small businesses throughout Hartford. So please consider our door always open to collaborate and think about ideas about how to really continue to reinvigorate our business community throughout Hartford. But welcome to that commission and thank you so much for the work you do. And I'm really excited to see what you bring because I had an opportunity to kind of watch your work from afar. And so being able to kind of see it up close and personal, I'm really excited about it.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hercules. Councilwoman Surgeon.
Mr. Chair, through you, could I put a motion on the floor?
Absolutely.
Yeah, motion to favorably send back to council the appointment of Mrs. Clark.
Second. Oops, sorry.
I'm sorry?
Nope, go ahead. Sorry.
Appointment favorable of Mrs. Clark to the Central Regional Tourism District.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, properly second, to send this appointment for Mrs. Marion Ando Clark to be appointed on the Tourism Central Region Tourism District to the council favorably. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Pass. Thank you, Marion, for dedicating more time out of your life to help the city of Hartford and our community. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to working with you as well as the rest of council. Thank you so much.
I do want to thank all the council members, and I'll do what I continue to do best for the city. I love this city, so I even appreciate just being nominated, and I hope to make you guys proud.
Awesome. Thank you,
right.
and have a good evening. Okay, so we're moving on to our second item on the agenda, and that is the, resolution calling for the Hartford Court of Common Council with the city departments to identify ways to create designated tractor trailer parking areas within the city. And who do we have to speak on? this item?
Mr. Chair, Aaron, Amy will, who?
Before,
Yes, Councilwoman Rossetti.
before Director Matthews speaks, Councilman, Chair Sanchez, could I have my name added to that, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Our director, Amy Chambers, will speak to that particular item. Amy?
Sure. Thank you, council members, for having us here tonight. Amy Chambers, Director of Planning within Development Services. I wanted to reference a memo that was sent to council back in the spring. I'm not sure if council members have had the opportunity to take a look at that. It would have been from the City of Hartford Interdepartmental Transportation Team with regards to this matter.
Google password.
Hold on one second, Director Chambers. My apologies. I'd like to recognize our Council President Mally Rosado is online. I'm not sure if we had the opportunity to review it was sent in the email.
It was sent in an email, but it was sent quite some time ago for council's review in response to this matter when it was or I think a couple of meetings after this matter was initially raised. I would be happy to go through what was contained in that if the council would find that useful.
Yeah, so that would be useful if you can just share with us the main points.
Sure. So after the initial resolution was passed back in March, the transportation team, which is an interdepartmental working group between Hartford Parking Authority Development Services, the Public Works, and representatives from Fire and periodically PD as well, met to examine the request and to take a look at how the question of tractor trailer parking could be better addressed, not only from the standpoint of availability of parking, but other policy related issues that may help with regard to just the general question of tractor trailer parking on city streets. Essentially, what was reviewed in that interdepartmental group was, again, the question of policy changes through city ordinance that may help with the question of enforcement, wider just enforcement questions in general, potential opportunities for education and outreach, and then the consideration of parking locations themselves. First and foremost, just with regard to the question of policy changes, a deep dive was done into the parking section in the municipal code, understanding, that the goal is not only to provide more enforcement opportunity, but to essentially arm our different departments, if you will, with different ways to be able to address the question of the illegal parking. In our municipal code presently, there are fines in place for illegal parking, and in particular with regard to trucks. But those fines have not been updated in quite some time. So part of what this memo suggested was that those fines could potentially be increased to help dissuade people from parking on the streets. In addition, there are 3-hour and 8-hour limits for on-street parking, and this is particularly with regard to trucks themselves, and an allowance for active unloading. And so there was reference made in this policy memo to essentially reduce some of those timeframes, which would also allow PD and the parking authority to be able to respond quicker with regard to finding trucks on the streets instead of having to wait those periods of time to be able to tow. Beyond that, the municipal code does not, in the most effective way, define trucks. So it kind of uses the terminology for trucks generally, In our research, we found that other municipal codes statewide have more by way of definition of the trucks themselves and what trucks are actually impacted by the ordinance. So we'd further propose that perhaps there could be better definition made to have a better understanding of what trucks would be subject to these sorts of provisions. We also generally had some conversation about how to provide better communications through some of our outreach with the NRZs and through the Office of Community Engagement around what the current policy is around tractor trailer parking or commercial truck parking, and how that might be able to be made more effective and shared through more channels. And then we did an assessment of city-owned property with regard to availability and suitability for parking locations, because again, and I know there was a lot of conversation with regard to this, we want to be able to address this issue from kind of a 360-degree lens, understanding that we do have a lot of people within the city who are working in this field and do need a place to be able to put their trucks, and certainly acknowledging that, for example, the Pride Station is full all of the time and that there needs to be other locations that are convenient to people. With regard to that deep dive related to city-owned properties, unfortunately, we did not find that the city owns property presently that would either be of a suitable size or a suitable location or just generally available, not being used for something else where we could establish tractor trailer parking. Some of the lots that we have in our portfolio are much smaller parcels, and many of them are nearby residential areas and may not effectively address the concern that has been raised to us. So within that memo, we'd actually made the recommendation that perhaps it would be more appropriate for there to be consideration towards partnering with private entities who are maybe using their parcels for something during the day and perhaps have space during evening hours to be able to accommodate vehicles of that size. Beyond that, the only other thing that was contained in that memo at that point in time was just a little bit of reference to other municipalities and how other municipalities within their codes treat enforcement around tractor trailer trucks. So we did provide a little bit of information with regard to Bridgeport, New Britain and Stamford, defining those trucks themselves and defining within their ordinance when those trucks may or may not be able to be parked and where, and then further what fines exist within their codes for parking as well. We did have Corporation Counsel take a look at the proposed modifications to the municipal ordinance, and essentially where we kind of left things internally was that we were hoping to hear back thoughts from this body in order to determine how to move forward. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any thoughts and then to go from there.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions. So you said that the city doesn't have an adequate sizable lot to assist with the tractor trailer parking. But do we have lots, for example, maybe a Homestead Avenue, Walnut Street, or even Windsor Avenue to dedicate as a drop yard, or maybe have a conversation with businesses that do have a large enough lot to create a drop yard. So if the city owns a large or fairly sizable lot for a drop yard, we could possibly lease it out to some shipping company, and then therefore these so-called drop lots, apparently what it is, because I just did a quick research. Basically, we lease the land to the company that utilizes tractor trailers. It's a dropping point, it's a pickup point, but then now with the tractor trailers, they can only drive, but I believe it's 10 hours per 24, and they have a need to park somewhere. And these drop yards is available to them as well where that kind of park is. Is there any kind of conversation on that, on drop yards?
So we have to take into account, Councilman, if there are parcels where we are actively working on potential opportunities for development, establishing parking lots, especially if they're not improved in the proper way, further contaminates those parcels and potentially makes development in the future much more expensive. We did want to be mindful of areas where there are either future plans for development or areas where we're actively working on development opportunities to ensure that we're not complicating that process for being able to develop them or having, additional impacts to those sites. We also wanted to be mindful of areas, as I mentioned, many of the properties that the city has within its portfolio are smaller parcels, but for some of those larger parcels, we wanted to be mindful of areas that are proximal to residential as well, not only from the standpoint of impacts to just the neighborhoods and to the residents who live in those neighborhoods, but also when we think about this from the standpoint of zoning, which is the hat that I wear, establishing whether it's a storage lot where someone's dropping the trailer itself, or it's a parking lot where they're actually parking the tractor itself. Those are actual land uses that are also part of the zoning code. And so there are some restrictions that exist in particular in our areas that are closer to residential that would prevent some of that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from my colleagues? Councilman LeBron, followed by Councilwoman Surgeon.
Yes, and thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Director Chambers. Good to see you again. And thank you for your comprehensive notice and outline of what you previously sent. I guess the question that I have is, I'm very, with these type of things, I'm very visual. Do we, in the memo that was sent, did we have a visual like of the city as to where the tractor trailers can park?
We don't have a visual for that. To be honest with you, Councilman, there are not any designated tractor trailer parking areas within the city beyond really the Pride Station. Mm-hmm. And so, I know that this issue was raised from the standpoint of, there are some parcels. I can think of one in particular where there has been tractor trailer parking, kind of unofficial tractor trailer parking, and that there has been, concerns raised around tractor trailers being parked on street, overnight. And so there are not other designated areas that exist for that.
So a follow-up question through you, Mr. Chair. So I think, so if I heard correctly, and please Director Chambers, redirect me if needed, is that in the provisions, we're talking about language of possibilities of parking. Would that be correct?
Are you talking about the memo that we sent back?
Yes.
Okay. In the memo that we sent back, we were essentially just reporting back to the council about having examined city properties because first and foremost, I believe the request was for staff to come up with some potential use of city property to support tractor trailer parking. So we did do an assessment of the city property that we have and the appropriateness or availability that could be made to establish lots like that. And essentially what we were reporting back is that as far as the properties that we have, we really don't have something that would be appropriate for that use, either because of location or size or, it being a potential development project currently, but that we had made the recommendation that perhaps having to explore some sort of public-private partnership or private partnership where there is, just rental made from a private property owner to, an owner of one of the vehicles might have to be the route that is taken.
So last comment question to you, Mr. Chair, if I can. Thank you. So, Director Chambers, do you need support? Are you looking for, with the memo? I'm trying to understand the relationship of the resolution and the resolve clause specifically, and the request of the city, and what I think the spirit of what we're trying to do here.
Sure.
So, what I want to do is take a step back.
Sure.
Currently, if I unpack it a little bit, is that there is no availability right now. And so the resolution specifically asks to take a look at if there's any potentiality. It sounds like there are none currently right now under the current constraints. Would I be correct in assuming that, Director Chambers?
That is correct, yes.
All right. So overall, here's my statement, Mr. Chair, through you. This is a concern. As we know, our tractor trailer industry is what makes America go, and what makes kind of the goods and services go. The more limitation as an industry that we have on the tractor trailers, the more that it affects business. And in an economy where we're suffering from severe inflation, by not having policies or even something as parking can create within the industry reluctance from a driver standpoint, and ultimately those costs, if they go up, will be on the consumers and on our constituents. So I would ask the entire group that we take time to really appreciate this, because this can be potentially a larger problem that is ultimately going to be absorbed by the constituents that we serve. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, and I appreciate what you said, Councilman LeBron, but the situation here is this, my opinion, of course, right, is that, now we're having, and it's not only tractor trailer, but it's large commercial vehicles that are being parked in neighborhoods where they're blocking these narrow streets that we have in the Southwest and the North End, throughout the city. And when they do get into the business and purchasing a tractor, and sometimes with the trailer, is my understanding that when they get this license, the CDL license to drive these vehicles, it's with the understanding that they do study and are taught the laws of the city, municipalities, whether it's a large city or towns. And in those training, they are told that they are not allowed to park in certain areas of the city, especially in neighborhoods. So that's no different from opening a brick and mortar business, because you still have to follow the law and put in the permits required. So I understand that, it is their responsibility to figure or find a way to station these large vehicles where it doesn't interfere with the residents who does pay taxes. And I understand that it eventually reaches out to the consumer, but this is not only just in the city of Hartford, it's throughout the state of Connecticut and the country. But being that I myself have not seen this memo, I would like to entertain a motion to postpone so that we can all have an opportunity to look at the memo and have a discussion, and then, send it to my DPH meeting next month.
I would second that.
Councilwoman Surgeon. Councilwoman Surgeon. You're muted.
Mute. I did have an opportunity to read the memo, even though we didn't get into it about 3 o'clock today. But the most important part of all this, and the actual resolution asked for the possibility of the city asking the development services to look into the possibility of finding a location. From reading a quick glance at the memo and also the ordinance that accommodates the memo, I want to, first of all, thank the development services, because one of the issues as we looked at the tractor trailers being parked, and I do agree with you, Councilman Sanchez, regarding the disruption of the residential neighborhood. I do understand the supply chain and the issues, and it's a lot of jobs that's opening up for our people that live in our community. but they are laws in the books, and the laws in the books were unfortunately minimum. And so in the ordinance that was submitted also, there was an increase for, I think, 125. I wish it would have gone up to more. I would like to see 250, because one of the things after speaking to some of the tractor trailer members who actually live on my street, paying $125 is not a big deal for them. So, my concern is that I would like to get this ordinance passed before the winter, because one of the problems with the tractor trailer parking on the street, especially last year winter, it disrupts the removal of snow. And so it is imperative that, we really take a look at this ordinance. I commend them with the timing that was put in the ordinance, because one of the problems with the old ordinance is that, the police department or the parking authority would wait a certain period of time before they could, ticket them. So I commend the zoning department, Ms. Chambers, for putting in some better time so we can have, those tractor trailer move. And also, I would like to see an increase from 125 to 250. So I will not object to postponing it so everyone will have an opportunity to read this, but I would like to see this pass before the winter begins and information be disseminated to the community and through the NRZ and through other block clubs so they can get it out to the people that they know that has been parking on the street before the winter starts.
Thank you, Councilwoman Surgeon. Councilwoman Hercules.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. First, thank you, Director Chambers, for the presentation. So I guess my takeaways are, and I do understand Councilwoman Surgeon's sentiment and with respect to the snow. If we pass the ordinance and the fine increases, that still, to me, wouldn't address the issue, because there are Hartford residents who are truck drivers. So they will continue to park their trucks in front of their homes and pay the fine, as Councilwoman Surgeon alluded to. So I'm just wondering, can that transportation team, how actionable is it for us to start looking at, alternatives that are not city owned? That seems to be the next best, the best possible pathway to getting these trucks actually off the street. Incurring more fines, again, that's a trickle down effect on the consumer. Ultimately, it's not going to resolve the issue. There are large lots, the mall, for example, that are not being used for many hours of the night. So it just seems like we could be innovative and think of some creative alternatives to finding a place for these trucks to park. And I'm sure that some of our neighbors may have a similar issue, and maybe there could be a collaborative effort around it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, apologies.
Sure. No, go ahead.
Thank you. So I definitely agree and certainly understand, your point around the question of enforcement. I think one of the things that we are trying to address with regard to that is, when we have requests that come from residents question why our enforcement bodies, parking, PD, et cetera, are not responding. And I definitely understand, with regard to the trickle down effect, and certainly that we know that many of these individuals are Hartford residents, that it's not necessarily the preferred alternative to just slap people with fines, but if they don't have, if those bodies don't have an effective way to be able to respond, to some of those matters, it kind of compounds the issue for the residents that are contacting the city and expecting that the city will respond in some way. So that's kind of why, we included that in there. I did want to just address with regard to the question of parcels, city-owned parcels. I know that some of the council members know that there are some larger parcels that the city owns that are in the North Meadows, for example. Many of those parcels are under long-term leases. So we would be in a position where we need to negotiate a lease with someone that we've signed for many years in order to be able to utilize those parcels. And with regard to the question of whether it's in this municipality or another municipality, obviously the mall is, in another municipality, we can initiate conversations with those property owners, but we're a little bit at the whim of those individuals who own those properties. Certainly we have less control over dictating what they might do with their own property, and still at the same time finding, properties that are properly zoned to be able to accommodate those types of uses. So there are a lot of challenges that come with trying to solve for that. And I think that, we wanted to just kind of put all of that on the table for the council.
Okay, Councilwoman Rosado, followed by Councilwoman Rossetti.
Councilman, I'm going to yield my time to Councilwoman Rossetti. I'll just wait, we'll postpone this and have further conversations. But, I must say that I have to agree with Councilman Sanchez. We have too many of these commercial and trucks vehicles parking in streets, in our regular streets where they shouldn't. And, we have a lot of issues in the city of Hartford when it comes to either public service, public safety, litter. And I would just like for this matter to be addressed as soon as possible. So I will yield my time to Councilwoman Rossetti. Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So here's my thing. And I think Councilwoman Hercules what she was saying is, let's think out of the box. Yeah, the mall's in another municipality. And thank you, Amy, Director Chambers, for, I haven't read it either, but I'm sure when we found, figured out, and it's before me, but when we figured out the blue light, parking lots, that was something where we said, oh my God, how are we going to do this? We have these cars, we have no place to put them. And people kind of sat together and figured out ways. And it's only going to get more, as Councilman LeBron picked out and pointed out. And it wreaks havoc in a neighborhood. I can't imagine what it does for, snow removal and public works, but it's dangerous. Coming around a corner, it's dangerous for kids, and my always thing, it's not accepted in other towns, and this is a time for us to say, how are we going to solve this? And maybe it is going to people we have long-standing contracts with. Well, stuff changes. Stuff changes. So I hope, and whatever I can do to add to the conversation, I don't want to be just someone who's like, let's figure it out and have no input, but I think we have an opportunity here, and it's only going to increase. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Councilwoman Surgeon.
Through you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that was not brought up on the table, and that is, speaking with some of these tractor trailer individuals. This is a business. We have reached out to several businessmen, because I consider them to be businessmen in the community. And what they have told us in the community is that, parking the truck in an area, there is no security. They lost off their, stuff in their trucks when they park it overnight. So in conjunction with finding a location for them, there is also, if they consider, who's going to manage the security for it. My question to them was, would you contribute, pay something per month towards this? They're not even cooperating and paying and, as any offset for the cost to the city. I think some people will, but the majority of the ones I spoke with, are not willing to at least contribute something if we found a place for them. So if we have to find a place for them, fine, I agree with that. Try to do something. They have to they have to pay towards this cost. It's something that cannot be given to them free, because this is a business they're doing. They're making a salary. And I really believe that, they don't really want to park their truck too far from where they live, because they want to be able to get up in the morning and then drive. So I have no problems postponing this. All I'm asking the committee to do is, getting back on the agenda for December, so we can pass this. So therefore, the parking authority, the police department, and whomever else can start initiating, the fines to hopefully deter them from parking this coming winter.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I also want to thank you, Amy, for for your presentation and giving us a nice rundown of the memo. So I would like to entertain a motion to postpone this until we can all look at this memo and think outside the box of what we can possibly do, at the very least, if it's temporary. And one of the thoughts I do have on mind is that the regional farmers market out in Maxim Road, Reservoir Road, it seems to me that at least 50% of that property is vacant. And I do know it's not city owned, is the state that's in charge of that location. Hoping that maybe we can have a conversation with the right folks for the regional market and hopefully create a temporary access and parking for these, tractor trailer owners. But at the same token, to Councilwoman Surgeon's point, they need to contribute. And I'm not looking to hand out a space that's vacant for free when we have to possibly help them with security or access somehow. So with that said, I'd like to entertain a motion to postpone this item until the next PDH committee meeting, which is December 7th.
Second the motion.
We need a motion first.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone this item to our next PEDH meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstain? Oppose? Okay. So we're going to postpone this until December 7th PDH meeting. Within that time, we'll look at the memo, and I do also agree with increasing the fees as well. So they take this serious and this council serious.
And Mr. Chair, don't forget, attached to the information that was sent out is a proposed ordinance.
Yes. Thank you. So we're moving on to item 2.3, our third item on the agenda. Mayor Bronin's with accompanying resolution adopting the City of Hartford's affordable housing plan. Who do we have here to speak on this item? Do we have anyone here?
Charles.
Yes.
Hey, Charles. You're muted.
Mr. Matthews, how are you? Brian Matthews?
Yep, I'm here, sir. Charles. Yes, I am. Charles, Director of Development Services, myself, Brian Matthews, the Director of Housing. We have Amy Chambers.
I'm on now.
Okay, perfect.
I'm on. Thank you, council members. One of the first meetings I had with council when I first arrived back in July of 2020, feels like 10 years already, but it was only July of 2020. We had a number of discussions about affordable housing and whether or not the city had a plan to deal with affordable housing. I think you will find in this presentation you're about to hear, and I want to let you know that staff has worked really hard, DDX staff, the housing staff people, Amy and her crew in planning have worked really hard to put together an affordable housing plan that, in my view, and you may disagree, is kind of cutting edge. They looked at all the circumstances. They involved many of the key stakeholders in the affordable housing field, and they have come up with a plan that will be our intent to submit to the state of Connecticut as our affordable housing plan for the next 10 years. You should know a lot of the goals and recommendations you may see in this plan, we will explore and adopt in things we will do within DDS over the next 2 to 3 years. So it's not just a plan, it's ideas and next steps for us to use within DDS to deal with many of the housing issues we have within the city. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to Evelyn, as the chair would say, Sant Louise to begin the presentation on the affordable housing plan, followed by Brian Matthews, Director of Housing, followed by Amy Chambers, our Director of Planning and Zoning, and then what would normally be a council opportunity to throw a lot of questions at us and give us a chance to answer all your questions or concerns you may have about the plan. Evelyn?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Evelyn St. Louis. I'm a senior planner here with the Planning Division. So I will get us started. So as Mr. Matthews mentioned, one of the main reasons, the main why behind preparing this affordable housing plan is to meet recent state legislation, Section 8-30J, that requires every town in the state to adopt and update an affordable housing plan every 5 years. And specifically, that legislation states that the plan has to show how the town intends to increase the number of affordable housing developments in the municipality. But as you all also probably know, Hartford does have, at the moment, about 40% of its housing that's considered subsidized affordable. But even having said that, we see this plan as an opportunity to, first better inform the public of what resources are available and what the city is working on in terms of affordable housing, but also to be more proactive and collaborative among divisions within the city for how we can, better plan for affordable housing. So just to provide a quick recap of the process so far, staff from the Planning Division and Housing Division primarily worked together to draft the first plan that was posted online on September 6th. And that first draft was really developed based on existing city documents, mainly the Plan of Conservation and Development, other existing city plans from the Housing Division, and also a guidebook that the state put out for sort of how to develop these types of plans. And then throughout the month of September, we really focused on community outreach, which I'll dive into a little bit in the next slide. So then that brings us to the beginning of October. We posted the revised draft, the final draft, where we actually tracked changes to be able to sort of show to the public what we had changed and what we did incorporate. And then on October 11th, we had the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing, and that's when they voted to favorably recommend the plan. And so we're before you here tonight. So the community outreach that we did consisted of sort of different types of formats. We held office hours sort of for more in-depth conversation with members of the public or specific stakeholders. We provided a presentation and had time for in-depth questions and conversation. We also provided a presentation to the LISC Neighborhood Development Support Collaborative that tends to be attended by various community development corporations in the city and other sort of housing stakeholders. Members of the public could also send in public comment, written public comment throughout September to our division, Planning Division. And we also made an effort to advertise verbally at NRZ meetings in September and October, key dates, the presentation dates and ways to engage with the plan. And then finally, we utilized email and social media to try to get the word out. We sent some specific emails to housing stakeholders that we know of in the city. We shared the plan with city staff and used sort of various listserv and Facebook and Instagram posts. And so just to sort of lay the context before we get into the nitty-gritty of the plan, we just wanted to start off with the vision statement for the plan, which sort of guides the rest of the document. So the Affordable Housing Plan envisions Hartford and the surrounding region as places where safe, high quality, and diverse housing options are available and attainable to households of all income levels. So I will now pass it on to Mr. Brian Matthews.
Thank you, Brian Matthews, Director of Housing. I want to thank the counselors for all their support throughout the years for what we do in DDS, particularly in the housing space. We'll start with this first slide. I won't go through all the data points, but the next couple of slides we'll talk about where we are as a city. It's really hard to talk about what we want to do and where we want to go without knowing who we are, what our reality is today. And so I'll kind of focus on a couple data points on this first page, and that is that you all know that we have a low home ownership rate. We'll talk about later in the plan what we're going to do about that. We live in New England, in the Northeast. We have an aged housing stock full of deferred maintenance issues, unled issues. What we've been really hearing from a lot of different people, and it's no secret, that many of our renters are cost burdened. They're paying more than ever, large portions of their income to pay for their housing expenses. Next slide, please. Affordability is when an individual household pays 30% or less of their gross income towards housing costs. We really looked at this plan, then we looked at subsidized housing, we looked at unsubsidized affordable housing. Hartford is lucky in that we have a number of public and private stakeholders who share our mission of providing housing across a number of income demographics and people of all walks of life. If you look to the left, there's a pretty good breakdown of affordability by neighborhood. And finally, for this slide, and this is going to be a recurring theme throughout the plan, and many of you are now aware of this, that 40% of the units in the city of Hartford are considered deed restricted affordable, either deed restricted or affordable by financial instrument. That number leads the state of Connecticut right now. Next slide.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Director Matthew, what can you explain what does that mean, deed restricted?
Right. And so here in the city of Hartford, there are a number of rental units, and there are either financial instruments or language within the deed of that property that suggests that the units in that property can be rented only to folks under a certain income. And so it's a written mandate in writing in the deed of a property or by financial instrument. So for instance, if a project were to borrow HUD money, for instance, to rehab their home, within that mortgage note from HUD, that agreement, that property owner has to agree for a prescribed period of time to rent those units to folks under a certain income level. And so by written document or restriction, those units are affordable. And here in the city of Hartford, it's estimated that 40% of our units, pretty large number, and we lead the state, are deed restricted or restricted by financial instrument, monies that they borrowed from the federal government, the state, or the city of Hartford.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So some of you are aware of these programs. These programs, in many cases, have been around for decades, and we're really proud of the successes that we've realized. For some of you newer members, we have a down payment assistance program. We have a residential rehab program. We have a Section 8 program. We have a fair rent commission. We have a tax abatement program for those larger projects that want to invest in capital improvements to make the units healthier and safer while keeping rents low for low to moderate income individuals. So a lot of programs we operate here are informed by data, the needs of the city, the challenges that the city has. And we'll talk more about those needs and challenges. But if anyone has any questions or any constituents that are interested in any of the programs here, the initiatives that we offer, please contact DDS. I also want to make another important point that, again, we've been doing this for decades. while some towns are just scratching the surface as it relates to affordability, many people in this room, counselors, the folks that work for the city, have been working on programs and advocating for affordability for decades. And we're proud to say that a lot of the programs and tools here, we've had a lot of success, and some of these same programs will be used in the future to garner more success. And Amy will talk more about that. If we can skip to the slide after that one, right? And so this is a slide regarding the parcels that allow multifamily housing. So there's some opportunities for multifamily development in the rental space. Next slide. So the rental housing market, we know there's a demand for rental housing in the city. A lot of those increases from 2017 to 21 have occurred in and around downtown. We have a great absorption rate, and that is that whenever there are empty units available, those units don't remain empty for long. That's a good problem to have. I think the takeaway from this slide is that while rising rents indicate a strong rental market, and that's great for landlords, we all know that as rents increase, it becomes harder and harder for individuals and families under certain incomes to find an apartment that they can afford. Next slide, please. Eviction filings. This is never fun. Hartford leads the state in the number of eviction filings, and we can see that they spiked during COVID. And we can go into why that is later. This slide does not show how many of these filings actually did not make it to court. Some of these filings did not result in actual eviction. As you know, the court, other agencies provide mediation services. And so we don't have that number here in that slide. If anyone's interested in that number, we can get that data for you at a later date. Next slide. Sales housing market. And so I think we've all witnessed dramatic increases in the value and sales prices for homes, where there are multiple offers on homes that are for sale. And again, the takeaway here, and I think we all know this, if you're a seller in this market, you're really happy about the money that you can make if you're selling. But again, with a rising value, rising sales price, it's really hard for folks who are low to moderate income without a deep subsidy to be able to afford some of the homes for sale today. Now, we have some tools to help combat that. Again, I think Amy is going to get into a little bit of that later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So as a city, we do have some opportunities. We have a great housing stock, both subsidized and not subsidized, where those units are worthy of investment, of preservation. We have a standing array of programs, tools, initiatives that are battle tested, have realized successes. We're looking for efficiencies. We're trying to figure out how to build on those tools to kind of create the outcomes that we want to see going forward. We have an opportunity to look at our zoning regulations for flexible housing types. There's a demand for market rate housing and affordable housing for that matter. So we have developers that are willing and able to work with us to create some of the housing choice that we're looking for. And finally, this concept might be a little bit new to some, but this idea of areas, mobility areas of opportunity. And I'll just give you an example. There are quite a few people that are interested in looking for opportunities outside of the city. Either there's family out there, or they like the school system, or they like the amenities. And more, we're working with different agencies, and we're working with HUD to give tenants an opportunity for choice. If they decide they want to live in Hartford, that's fantastic. We're welcome to have them. We love that. If they want to try outside of the city, we're trying to put systems, procedures, policies, partners in place to help make that happen. If anyone has any questions later about that, we can delve into that. Next slide.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. Director Matthews, Council President Rosado has a question.
Hi, Director Matthews. My question is, I think, I don't know if you brought it up or the person who presented before you. It was talked about feedback from the public, and I know that someone mentioned social media. I don't know if it was you, but what other outreach was received from the public? Did you have like round table discussions from residents for the city of Hartford? Can anybody elaborate on that?
Evelyn, do you want to go back to that slide? So thank you, Council President. We conducted outreach in a number of different ways. We did not solely rely on social media. We had those 2 office hour sessions, which were open to the public. In order to spread the word about those, we communicated through the NRZs and through the Office of Community Engagement in the newsletters that they send out. We have staff from the Planning and Zoning Division that attend each NRZ in the month, and they have time in those agendas to make announcements. And so we utilize that time to let people know that the plan was something that we were working on, also to communicate to them that we would be having those outreach sessions, and as well to let people know that we would be accepting comments, whether via email or if people wanted to drop anything off to our office. So when we had the 2 office hour sessions, I think we had, there wasn't a massive turnout, but I think we maybe had 20 to 30 people at each of the sessions that we held. We also asked in each of the kind of outreach bits that we did, whether they were announcements at the NRZs or announcements to individuals working for organizations, that they help us to spread the word and that they spread the word to their networks. So we did the presentation at the Lisk Neighborhood Development Support Collaborative, which is essentially membership of kind of all of the community organizations that are working around the city that touch housing or economic development in some way, and gave the same presentation that we did in the office hour sessions, a little bit truncated just due to time, but asked again for folks to help us spread the word. So we didn't rely strictly on social media in our communications for this plan. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
sure. So the first bullet that says organize 2 office hour sessions for in-depth conversation, was that where did that take place, and who were the majority of the attendees? Were there just regular residents from the city of Hartford, or were they from housing authorities? Were they from nonprofits? What was the attendance like?
Those took place virtually. They were held virtually. We had in one of them, I would say we had more representatives from housing organizations or people who worked in housing in some capacity. The other one, I would say we had more folks who were residents. There was one earlier in the day and then one later in the day.
Okay, so the ones that were residents from the city of Hartford, what was the attendance like?
Again, both of them were about 25 to 30 people.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I also have a question from Councilwoman Rossetti. Councilwoman Rossetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to follow on Council President Rosado's statements, my concern, as always, and number one, were, these things, what time of day are these meetings done besides the advertised verbally at NRZ meetings, which I don't know exactly what that means. What time of day were these done?
Right. So the office hour sessions, one was done in the morning, one was done in the afternoon. We also did a presentation at Planning and Zoning one evening separate from the public hearing, and that's at 6 p.m.
So doing things during the day really leaves out a whole swath of residents. No, no access. So, I mean, that, and this is not a criticism, but I think as we come out of doing things virtually, oftentimes many people can't do things virtually during the day or in person. So I think we really need to be sensitive to that. We want people's input. We got to do it when we got to meet them where they can do it. And, planning and zoning, great, but that's not really also somewhere where someone's going to go to get this information. I also would like to know what kind of languages we did this in. Are we making it accessible to people so people can, hear what you're saying? I would be interested to know what advertise verbally means at NRZs. Do you just go to the NRZ and say, hey, we're doing this thing? I mean, what does that mean? And what NRZs did you do it at?
Sure. So like I said, we have staff that go to each NRZ meeting every month. And we have space on those agendas to make announcements as representatives of development services. And each of the staff goes to those meetings. Basically, what our goal was in those meetings was to let people know that we were working on the plan, let them know why we're working on the plan, let them know what opportunities exist to kind of talk more about the plan, to let them know that we're accepting comments or questions on the plan and how to reach us in order to be able to, communicate about any of those comments or questions that they have. With regard to languages, at our website, the city website can be translated automatically into Spanish. So we have it available in English and Spanish.
And I think, again, and this is not meant, but I think we need to think in this way. It's not for the residents to respond. It's for us to make it easy for them to respond. So looking for responses and that kind of thing, you need to do it in a way. I just got a link recently from an NRZ. Give us some input. But I got the link and they asked me the questions and I was able to respond. Oftentimes people don't know what it is that they don't know. You know what I mean? So you're saying to them, make a comment on it. And I go to some NRZ meetings pretty regularly, and bringing something up this robust at an NRZ meeting, that's not going to automatically let someone say, oh, wow, I have questions on that. If it's kind of delved into, you would. So I think it's our obligation, it's your obligation to say, how can we make this so people, number one, know what to ask, why they should ask it, feel comfortable. It doesn't fall on them, it falls on us. So that's my comment.
Thank you. And if I may, through you, Chair.
Yes.
The purpose of, so we don't want to co-opt all of the time, as you know, and I'm sure as many of you know, there's a lot of information that comes out in NRZ meetings themselves. This is a really robust plan, to your point. There's a lot of information that's contained in it. And so in going to those NRZ meetings, our goal was to let people know where we were going to have forums where we really could make the space to dig into them. And some of these slides specifically, although we've modified it a bit for you all, were actually used in some of those presentations that we did. And so we actually went through in much greater detail than we have presented or will present for you all today, what is contained in the document itself in those presentations, and really had some really good conversations, to be honest with you, with people, and got some great feedback even via email from people after them having heard one of those presentations. So I definitely hear you and I agree with you. I do want you to know that we do understand that we need to go into detail and that we need to provide people with information and that we need to break down that information more. And even one of the bits of feedback that we got from a community resident when we did one of those presentations was that we need to better define when we talk about subsidized housing or when we talk about affordable housing, what that actually means in like everyday terms. So Joe works in this job, he makes this much per hour, his rent is this. Is his housing affordable for him in the concept that we're defining? And we actually did change the plan to reflect that information on the basis of that feedback. So I do want you to know that we definitely hear that, and we're trying to make attempts to make space for that sort of conversation, specifically in response to your feedback the last time we came before you with regard to planning.
And I appreciate that, Director Chambers. As I said, this isn't, but I think we need to continue to think in the ways of how can we make it easier, not, and then my final thing, Mr. Chair, I apologize. The one of the slides that Brian Matthews had up, can you tell me the abbreviation for ADU and TOD? Right there.
Take that one
The
too.
land use tool.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it was, maybe it was in the one before. It's, oh, I see accessory dwelling units and what's TOD overlay? What's a TOD?
That's transit oriented development.
Okay, thank you.
I was just wondering, Mr. Chair, might be possible, because it might be additional questions, if we can at least get through the slide presentation and then answer all the questions?
I agree. I was gonna have Councilwoman Surgeon ask her question. Then from there we move on with the presentation.
It's not a matter of a question through you, Mr. Chair. In response to Councilman Rossetti's presentation, I belong to my NRZ in Upper Albany, and they did come to the Upper Albany NRZ and did an in-depth presentation, just like we're asking question, what this means, what that means. And we have normally about 20 plus people come, residents who attend our NRZ meetings. So in defense, and I don't know what happens in other NRZ, but I only can speak for Upper Albany. We have a robust discussion regarding affordable housing, because Upper Albany is a rental community. And due to that fact, we had a really robust discussion with development services and how are they going to help our residents in Upper Albany and the landowners and all those deed restrictions. So in response, I would say that I can't speak for all the NRZs, but I do know at the Upper Albany NRZ, this was presented. We gave development services back our opinion and what we thought. And I do see a few information that we gave back it's implemented in the plan. So I'm only going to speak for my NRZ, and we are aware of the program, and we did get input into the program.
Thank you, Councilwoman Surgeon. Luis, if you may continue the presentation. Thank you.
Actually, I think it was Brian.
Okay, yep, that's me. I'll finish the last 2 slides.
Okay, thank you, Director Matthews.
Excuse me, Brian, if the question comes up later, I want you to go back and for the council members, again, try to define what the products and the tools are. You may know them very well, but given some earlier comments, take about a minute to define the down payment assistance program and the other programs so they'll have a clear sense of the tools we're using.
Yes, sir. So I believe we're slide 15. These are just some of the challenges and the needs. I think we've covered some of these needs and challenges, but I just want everyone to be really sober about what we're up against. And so again, we really have to do something to increase our home ownership rate. We do care about rental. We do want to see affordable rental, but our home ownership rate is really low, and we have to do something about that. We've seen an increase in fair rent complaints that's overwhelmed us right now. And so we have a backlog that we're really working through, and we'll get there. Many folks, we've talked to, Amy has stated this, we've talked to a number of different stakeholders in the city, organizations, individuals. Some of you have given us some of this input. We are looking into creating a security deposit program. That is part of our 5-year plan. We recognize that when there are people looking for an apartment and they can't come up with their security deposit, that individual family is in trouble. That's a housing instability issue. And we recognize that we need to do something about that. And over the course of the next 6 months, we're going to investigate a program that we think might be effective. We talked about renters being cost burden. We recognize that there's a lack of affordable housing for targeted populations, such as seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. We have an aged housing stock. A lot of our housing stock, we need deferred maintenance tools. And there's quite a bit of lead and blight. And so you'll see we'll be using tools in the future, as we are now, to combat some of that. We also, and the mayor is going to spearhead this with some others. We recognize that other towns and cities have to do their fair share, whether it deals with social services or affordable housing. Hartford has led the way, and I'm proud of that. I think we all are, and we care about these issues. But other towns have to recognize that it's a regional issue. It's a regional solution. So I know the mayor is going to work really hard with some other folks like Charles to talk to counterparts in other towns and cities and see how we can work together to solve what everyone would agree is a growing problem, and that is affordability. And so with that, I believe Amy Chambers is next, and we'll take you through the next several slides.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, council members, again. So to move into the next section of the presentation, we identified 8 goals in the plan and kind of rooted those goals in the city's plan of conservation and development. Again, to just kind of bring full circle some of the policy matters that we're working on, and also to be able to tie them to the city's comprehensive plan and to be able to root them in this plan. So goal number 1 is to advance racial and socioeconomic equity. Number 2, thank you. No, that's okay. You can go to the next slide. I'll name each of the goals as we go through. So within goal number 1, we want to gather and maintain better local data by race and ethnicity and socioeconomic status. This will help us inform local policy better and to provide more nuance in our findings when we do develop local policy. We also wanted to note that we feel that a number of the other goals in the next series also address the question of advancing racial and socioeconomic equity, and that we want to center this goal number 1 in and root it in those other goals as well. We can go on to the next slide. So goal number 2 is to encourage housing production at all income levels and to increase residential density citywide. We want to do that by supporting increased residential density in downtown and to continue to support affordability in those projects at a rate of 5 to 20%. At the present time, we expect to bring on an additional 520 units in the next 5 years, of which at this point in time, 10% of them would be affordable. Action number 2B is to support targeted development of new affordable housing, including housing specifically for seniors, veterans, and individuals with disabilities. And I would note that the question of senior housing and veteran housing also came from feedback from residents. As well, we'd like to continue to support the redevelopment of public housing projects and to encourage mixed income housing. On to the next slide. Further digging into this goal, we want to explore the adoption of predictable affordability requirements as part of deals, in particular for residential development in downtown, and to explore revisions to the city's overall disposition strategy. And to encourage the construction of ADUs, and Councilwoman Rossetti, previously you'd asked the question about ADUs. ADUs are accessory dwelling units. They are additional units that can be developed whether inside someone's home or in an accessory building. For example, in this picture, we have a garage. These are opportunities for smaller units, which are not necessarily deed restricted units, but help to build density within a city and help to support affordable development, as well to support, you know, sometimes they're called mother-in-law suites or granny flats, to support families living together. The next item is to encourage the continuation of neighborhood planning and to ensure in that process that we incorporate housing issues in those plans being ground up plans, so that we're really hearing from the neighborhoods themselves about what housing priorities they have at the neighborhood level, and to include in that housing affordability. Next slide. Goal 3, to improve housing quality and invest in existing affordable housing. So we want to focus on improving at least 2,500 rental units over the next 5 years through the city's programs. That includes home improvement programs and lead abatement. To continue to phase in the rental licensing program, as all of you probably know, the rental licensing program has been developed so that it phases in over time and addresses different types of housing and different tenure of housing, just in terms of numbers of units, et cetera. And so Judith Rothschild is on the line now and is working on implementing that program. To continue the city's ongoing partnership with the Hartford Land Bank, we have the goal of transferring up to 100 parcels to the land bank.
Mr. Chair, so I am trying
Yes, Council President.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I am trying to follow the housing plan, the revised final draft, October 7th. And what page are you on, Amy? Is that page 64? Because my page 64 doesn't look like that page. It doesn't have that draft. So I want to make sure I'm reading and looking at the right one.
Sure. This is just a slide deck. We've taken information to present to you, but I can comb through the plan if you'd like me to find kind of.
That's okay. I thought I had a different plan.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. And I'm happy to, if you'd like, Council President, offline at some point in time, if you have just questions about the structure, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
No, that's okay. Thank you. It's just that, you know, this plan is 80 pages long, right? And so I feel like we started on page 1 and goal number 3 is page 64. And I saw these pictures and I didn't see it on here, but if it's just a presentation that you have for council, that's okay.
Right. Yeah. We didn't want to go through page by page. We'd be here all night.
Didn't want you to be there all night.
Mm-mm.
All right. Amy.
Evelyn, if you could go on to the next slide. So goal number 3 is just continuing goal number 3, to explore funding and financing sources specifically targeted at home repairs for historic homes. So this is a really important one. We have a lot of homeowners who come to us, my staff being the ones who are responsible for the Historic Preservation Commission. And oftentimes in general, historic preservation is not always in line with the needs of affordable homeownership. And so we want to ensure that we're being mindful of the fact that much of the city is within a historic district, and that our residents who live in historic homes are supported, and that we're able to be more mindful of those needs, which can sometimes be divergent. And similarly, to revise the city's historic preservation ordinance to include more predictability and better guidance around how the Historic Preservation Commission should determine economic hardship. Next slide, please. Goal 4 is to increase resources for tenants. So I know we've heard tonight about the fact that we are a rental heavy city, and we do want to make sure that we are specifically, while we are talking about homeownership in this plan, we are also talking about the needs of tenants across the city. So in order to do that, we've identified the following: to explore the creation of a new security deposit program for tenants, to continue to issue tenant-based vouchers, which will help households find housing on the market, and that would be whether it's within city limits or elsewhere. to continue to provide project-based vouchers to create the affordability for tenants and income certainty for landlords over the next several years. To increase visibility and access to the Fair Rent Commission. In doing so, we seek to have additional commissioners brought on board to streamline the process of getting through that commission and to improve access to the commission itself. To explore expanding the role of our fair housing officer. So that is an individual who sits in the housing division, and to potentially have that person dig in more to educating tenants about rights and resources, and to explore the impact of short-term rentals on Hartford's residential market and whether improved regulations or restrictions are needed. So right now we manage short-term rentals through the zoning process. We don't have a lot of data outside of our zoning permits around the proliferation of short-term rentals. And in many cities, in particular cities where there is a great deal of tourism, I'm sure as many of you know, short-term rentals can really put a strain on the housing market. This is something where we can actually seek to just improve having knowledge of that, and to, in gaining that knowledge, better determine how to treat those types of uses. Next slide. Goal number 5, to encourage homeownership. And to do that through creating homeownership opportunities for low and moderate income households, and as well to provide more direct counseling resources to first-time home buyers. Number 6, to strengthen families by preventing homelessness and providing supportive services. So to provide additional assistance in the relocation of McKinney Shelter, and as well to provide assistance in the relocation of the South Park Inn. Goal 7, to communicate and advertise available resources to residents. So we included this because we know there are ways in which we can continue to better our outreach efforts, and the success of our programs, even our existing programs, will really depend on people knowing about those programs. So we intend to do this by providing more public-facing information to residents and stakeholders, by continuing to provide and even to increase our regular updates with the NRZs, and to better advertise that the city has a fair housing officer who is available to assist with potential issues or questions. And then goal 8, which is to encourage a regional and fair share approach to housing, to explore the adoption of mobility programs to offer services to households who wish to use their vouchers elsewhere, and to work with non-Hartford partners to adopt regional housing policies. Next slide. Evelyn.
Yes, thank you. So we just wanted to close out this presentation with a recap of how the community input we received after posting the first draft shaped the draft that's now before you. So as Amy mentioned earlier, you know, we heard from a couple people about the need to make the plan a little bit more accessible to a, you know, just a normal, regular audience. So we tried to do that in a couple places in the report. We were also asked to show more data by race and ethnicity, so we added that in. As Brian mentioned, you know, several people were concerned around rising rents and what that could mean in terms of, you know, gentrification or displacement. So we added some language in the report, just sort of acknowledging those dynamics, and similarly for rising home values, how it can be sort of a double-edged sword. Some members of the public also identified additional housing needs that we hadn't originally identified, such as overcrowding, and also in certain cases, poor quality of affordable housing projects, so not just housing at large. And also a desire to see a little bit more of the market data broken out by different types of categories. A few people were quite concerned about evictions, and based on that feedback, actually, we went and pulled eviction filing data and sort of looked into that question more. So that wasn't in the first draft. That was really based on feedback from the public. Some of the NRZ leaders wanted to understand why the strategy was really focused on citywide goals. So we tried to add some explanation in the plan on that question. Some members of the public just expressed support for specific actions. So we, in that case, just took note of that. And some of the action items that Amy shared were also recommended by that we received them through the outreach process. So the action items around ADUs, short-term rentals, historic homes, counseling for first-time home buyers, and how we communicate the resources that we do have to the public. And if anyone on the line is interested in seeing the full summary of public comments, it is available at the link included here. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for your time. We will gladly take any questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. St. Louis, for your presentation. If you may, can you please take the screen down so that we're all online? Okay, thank you. So any questions from my colleagues? Councilwoman Hercules.
Maybe not a question, but maybe just more so a comment. First, thank you for the presentation. It was insightful, and I know the document was pretty dense and it took a lot of work and effort, so definitely appreciate it. This is obviously housing, and affordable housing is an issue that we are all very much concerned with, particularly if you participated or observed the last public comment session. So I appreciated Director Chambers where there were specific goals around data, like targets like 200 and 100 in numbers. I think as much as possible, each of those goals in the plan really need to articulate a specific number, how much, by when, and then what are the resources going to be necessary to make it happen? Because we had an opportunity during budget to support some of these goals, one specifically being the rental and eviction assistance that Councilman Mixon and myself proposed, and the other being to fully staff the department with the necessary number of inspectors to decrease the amount of blighted and unsafe housing in our city. And we did not do both of those things. And so if this is going to be the plan that we adopt, we need to make sure as much as possible that our actions with respect to budget are congruent with these articulated goals in this plan. So I think the more we can kind of parse out the specifics around that and clearly articulate it to make sure we are in alignment, the better off we will all be, this time next year when we're looking back at, hey, how are we tracking on this plan? Mr. Matthews started out talking about some of the statistics and challenges, the 36,000 number that we all are very familiar with being our median household income. That would mean around $900 a month someone would be paying for rent. What I'm seeing prop up throughout the city does not reflect affordability, not even for myself, which I make a pretty decent salary. There's 2-bedroom apartments upwards of $2,500. I don't know how many residents currently could actually afford that. So it would be interesting to see, what are people currently spending on rent throughout the city? I know we use this affordable housing definition very loosely, but I'd argue that there's hardly any housing stock that's around $900 in the city, that it's continuing to increase. And so is there a time to relook at that definition? I know that is a statewide thing, but again, working with the states, I think that may be something we need to start advocating for, because I would say that housing just simply isn't affordable. And if our definition is not keeping up with inflation and the cost of housing, we are going to constantly be a decade or so behind in getting people to where they need to be with respect to being able to afford where they live. I had another point and I just forgot what it was. It just slipped my mind, but maybe I will come back to it.
If I may, Mr. Chair, to the councilwoman,
Yes.
You should know that we have another meeting coming up. I believe it is on November 11th when you have the COW meeting, the Committee of the Whole, where we will be going into somewhat greater details on some areas around the number of staff persons that we may need. The mayor, as you know, is working with council to develop some recommendations around staffing and some other goals around housing we'll be talking about at the COW meeting. I believe you're on the 11th. So some of those questions will be answered at the COW meeting.
Yes, I am aware of that.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions before I pass it on to my colleagues. So, Director Charles, hi Charles, is this time sensitive?
Well, the truth be told, we had an obligation to get it to the state, I believe in July. And because we put so much time in it, we indicated to the state that we will try to get it done by November. So we're now in November. So to that degree is time sensitive. I guess what I'm trying to determine is what's you have a concern or a question do you want to put on the table?
Well, I have a couple of questions and then I'll have my colleagues actually the rest of their questions. So right now, my first question is, was there any collaboration or conversation with the Hartford Housing Authority on this subject?
Yes.
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 So they had significant input?
Well, yes, they did. We had a direct meeting, I believe, Amy, helped me out here, and that the chair of the Housing Authority, she was in a number of our meetings, so certainly she was involved in it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So then now I'm just curious now. So I remember my first term being on council. We've always had an opportunity with developers to assure that there's a 20% affordable housing in a new development. So for example, now on the Pennant, that's only 10% and they're all studios. So what's the issue there when, why did we get a 20% affordable housing with that agreement? And why is it only studios when there's an opportunity with 1 2-bedroom apartments?
Sometimes it depends on the funding source. Other time it depends on whether the project will pencil out. The numbers sometimes will drive it. We try to push for as many 2-bedroom opportunities as we can, but sometimes when it comes to trying to pencil these projects out, the developers will push back and indicate that his numbers may not work if he goes with a 2-bedroom at a lower price or something of that nature. And that's the issue, but I'll get you a better answer for that on specific projects. Every project is different when we try to do these 5% versus 20%. And I'll get you a better answer on that.
Okay, thank you. And then also, please share that presentation with the entire council. I'd like to review the entire package. And I believe you did send it, Director Chambers, correct? Earlier?
I believe that it was circulated by either Adam or Lady. I did not send this earlier today.
Okay, so now I'm going to yield the floor to Councilwoman Surgeon, followed by Councilwoman Rossetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. I want to also echo Councilwoman Hercules' statement regarding funding source. One of the issues looking at the project, the housing project, and as we talked about, how we're going to improve our housing stock and where the funds are coming from, I do agree that we do need to pencil out some timeline where the funding sources are going to come from. I do remember speaking with the housing department regarding, the security deposit. Where would we get the money from to do so? So as we, should we adopt this? And when you do come back to council for your 11th presentation, I would like to see some timeline and some funding sources of how do you think you're going to, or what your needs are going to be to accomplish your goals that you have placed, in the housing plan. And do we need a partnership with the state? Do we need to go to our delegation, for the next, looking for funding source? So I think that's important for us to know in advance, when we would send this project back to the state.
Yeah. If I may, Mr. Chair, so we treat some of our goals just like we treat a development project. Madam Councilperson, and we look for funding sources. For example, on the security deposit program, we have identified a funding source. If, as we talk about improving 2,500 units of housing over the next 5 years, we have identified a funding source, and we can share more of that with you at the COW meeting. We didn't anticipate it would be something we would share at this meeting, but we can certainly share that with you. I think you're right. We have an obligation to show the council not only what our goals may be, but where we're going to get the money from to make these goals be achieved. So we're going to share that with you on the 11th in terms of funding source for each new project we're trying to do.
Okay. Thank you, Mr.
I don't believe it will be general fund money, just to let you know. We're looking for other sources of funding.
Councilwoman Rossetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm happy to hear the security deposit piece, because working with Councilman Mitchum and Councilwoman Hercules, I work directly with Councilman Mitchum. There was a letter sent from the three of us to the mayor's office back in July. I met with the mayor, and there wasn't, and his administration, there didn't seem to be an appetite for the security deposit piece. So we have some in-depth work that we've already worked on, working with what Councilman Mitchum knew, Councilman Hercules, and some of the housing piece that I knew. So I would love to share that with you all. And I'm glad to hear that there's an appetite for that, because it didn't seem like there was one back in July. So thank you.
Thank you.
And through you, Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Rossetti, if you could
Yes.
share with all council the recommendations, please.
I'll forward that to everybody.
Thank you.
So do I have any other questions or statements from my colleagues?
I'd like to,
Okay.
through you, Chair, I'd like to make a motion to postpone this item until we hear from the upcoming Committee of the Whole meeting, followed by the public comment that we will have before our next council meeting, where we will have numerous residents participate in public comment regarding housing issues in the city of Hartford. That's my motion.
A second.
Okay, a motion's been made, properly second. Any further discussion? Councilwoman Surgeon, followed by Councilwoman Hercules.
Right. Through you, Mr. Chair, it seems like the city has a deadline they have to get to the state. We do have two council meeting coming up in November. Not know if that's going to be sufficient time for the city to get back to the state. One of the things in the plan is, as I read it, all going through all 80 pages, I know there's no timeline or there is no funding sources and that information. This is a plan, and I think that if we want to get a little bit more in-depth detail in how we're going to implement the plan, that comes later. But we do have to agree or recommend a council to pass this plan as is, and then the remaining time we can look at how we're going to implement this plan. I have not seen through all the information that has been presented by the development services. It's a formidable plan. It's a huge wish plan. They seems to have know how they're going to fund it. But I think it's a plan where I believe Hartford residents and myself can be proud of our housing plan for the city of Hartford. So I am not going to agree to postpone this item due to the timeline, and that the development services will get back to us on how they're going to implement the plan.
Councilwoman Hercules.
Yeah, I will vote to postpone it, but as it stands, I don't believe that this plan goes far enough to address innovative strategies to implement affordable housing or to support further affordable housing in our city. It was a great presentation, but a lot of these resources and strategies are not things that are new outside of maybe the land bank. I think that was really the only new thing that was discussed. And so I would encourage or implore either this body or the administration to work alongside community residents and not come up with a plan and then ask for input on it, to really develop a plan parallel in tandem in partnership with the community. And then once that plan is done with fidelity, I was waiting with bated breath to hear these cutting edge strategies that Director Matthews mentioned in the beginning, and we just did not get it. And so unless I'm missing something, it's just more of the same. And I think that is disappointing given that the housing crisis that not only we are in this city, but throughout the state. And so I think we are mandated at this time to do more, to think innovatively, and to really look at what kind of city we truly want, and to be true to that. I know one likes to use the G word, but gentrification is what I see. That is the appetite, and not supporting the residents who are here and those who can, who have been here and want to live in Hartford. I don't know where people go to have affordable housing if they're not in the city. Are they going to Windham County where there's no resources, not many jobs, and either even further away from opportunity? I don't think that's what we want, but that seems to be what's happening more and more here in the city. And while I love the way these apartments look downtown, those plans do not have all of our Black and brown residents in mind. And so we need to really figure out who we want to be and who we are now and how we get there, and be true to that, because there's a lot of innuendo and messaging throughout the city that to me doesn't reflect my neighbors and the type of city we want to see.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hercules. Council President Rosado, followed by Councilman Lebron.
Yes, and so, and I'm going to leave it at this, is the state was expecting this plan in July, August, September, October. Here we are in November. I am no longer going to rush anything that comes through this council body. We will work collaboratively with the administration, but this plan really needs more input from the public, and I do not want to put or approve anything forward without listening to our residents. They deserve better. And I am elected to represent them. That is exactly what I'm going to do on this plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. And Councilman Lebron.
So thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair. So a couple things regarding this. This is extremely, extremely important, I think, for all of us. I think that when we approach things, when we approach something like affordable housing, that we understand that it's not a zero-sum game. This is a shared effort. The lines that we create around the communities, around our cities, are man-made lines. And what I mean by that is collectively, this has to be a collaborative effort. So I agree to the fullest is that we definitely need the public. It doesn't make sense to draft and adopt something now and then after, kind of as a matter of factly, then get public comment. That's disingenuous. And so I wanted to make that comment. The next thing is that of its importance, I read the draft, I read the comments, and I read the entire summary, and I have a lot of questions. And so as a result, I would imagine that there are a ton of questions that would be had by not only my council colleagues when they get a chance to dive in, but also the public. And I agree with Councilwoman Hercules. There is some ideas, but there's mostly ideology. And so we need to shift from ideology to specific ideas in order for me to feel comfortable. The second thing is, or maybe I'm the third thing, the deadline. Up to this point, the latest article that I read was that only 30 to 40% of the towns and cities have submitted a plan up until this point. If you go to the debate from the governor, he had to instill like they call the stick and the carrot. He instilled a stick around this, not particularly focused on our city areas, but focused on those other areas who do not want to bring affordable housing. They do not want to share in this issue. And so as a result, the governor had to resolve. So I would say that we take our time with this and play alongside our other cities and towns who are taking their time, because what their plans are doing in the greater Hartford County affect what we can potentially do. There are goals in the plan that talk about other communities. Why not see what those communities are doing first? It's almost like we're playing poker with someone and we're showing them our hand. We need to see what they got, because we already have, as cities, and I'm talking about Hartford and other towns, we are taking the burden of that. I want to see the other poker hands and see how they are helping with this, because it's a mandate coming from the governor and the entire state. So I'll stop there, and that's why I think we should postpone. I understand deadlines, but if there's a deadline issue, the majority of our towns and cities have this deadline issue. We might as well get it right. We might as well be patient. We might as well listen. We might as well do our due diligence, because housing, we are in a housing crisis in the city of Hartford. Every single day, residents are reaching out to me. I want to apologize to Lydia Colon, who's probably looking at this right now. Every single day, we're facing eviction. Every single day, people are looking for security deposits. Every single day. Hartford is taking on the burden for social services for the entire county and the cities for the entire state. We need to pause. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Director.
Just for the sake of clarity, I was not trying to suggest that we have a deadline. We have already missed the deadline. The deadline was in July. We sent a letter to the state when we missed the deadline in July, and we indicated to them we understood that we missed the deadline, but we'll try to get them something by November. Obviously, as a council, you can elect to disregard what we have said to the state, and we understand that and we respect that. I think to Councilperson LeBron's point, at the end of the day, this is my view now, one person. If we're waiting for the other community to show their hand, they won't be showing us much, because he's exactly right. They don't want to tackle any of these problems. They don't want to deal with issues around affordability. They don't want to deal with issues around homelessness. We are the only game in town. So we have to understand where we are and move forward with that. But I respect the fact that if council decide they want more time, we think we had a public engagement process. If you think we need to do more, we can talk about that. And after the call meeting, we can reconvene and see if we gave you enough information at the call meeting to satisfy some of the questions you may or may not have.
I appreciate that, Director Matthew. So I just want to make one quick statement, and I will be doing a roll call rather than a total vote. I share the same sentiment of all my colleagues, but most specifically, like I said, this is going to be short. Councilman LeBron hit the nail on the head. All right, Hartford has been shouldering the burden of the entire region for years. It's time for our neighboring towns to start stepping up to the plate and doing their part so that we're all on the same playing field. And right now, Hartford is not in the same playing field. So with that said, I will be doing a roll call.
Sure.
So to my committee members, a motion has been made, properly second, to postpone the housing plan, the affordable housing plan. So this vote is on that. So Council President?
Yes to postpone.
Councilwoman Surgeon?
No, not to postpone.
Councilwoman Rossetti?
Yes to postpone.
Councilwoman Hercules?
Yes.
Councilman LeBron?
Yes.
And myself is a yes. So this has passed as far as postponing. We have 5 for yes, 1 no, and no abstentions. Thank you. So we'll be definitely sharing this information for the council's public comments, which I think is important. And now we are going to move on to the last item, which is a presentation by I believe the Connecticut Aviation Authority. So it's Mayor Bronin with a company resolution authorizing the city to grant to CAA, which is Connecticut Aviation Authority, clearance easement on land that is owned by the city near the Hartford Brandon Airport. And I believe we have Director Looney here to speak on that. Let me see here. I believe Frank Della Ripa is here, our city engineer. I also invited Chairman Jack Hale from the Tree Commission. I have, give me 1 second, Corporation Counsel Howard Rifkin, James Del Visco, Richard Visaggio. Just going through what I can see here. And if I missed anyone's name, please just announce yourself. And then also from the CAA, let me see here.
Yeah, Kevin Dillon.
Okay, I see you now. Thank you for speaking up. Is there anyone else here from Brandon Airport or CAA?
Yeah, Councilman, tonight I'm joined by Alex Peterson, who's our Director of Government Affairs. Also have Bob Bruno with me tonight, who's our Director of Engineering. And we also have some representatives from our consultant, Stantec Engineering. We have Peter Enzyme and Randy Christensen. So all of these folks will be available to answer questions. Certainly want to thank the council or the committee for taking this up tonight. As you know, this is a very important safety project. The trees that we'll be discussing tonight represent obstruction to the flight path at the airport. This is a project that we've been talking about since 2017. So each year that goes by, the tree condition gets a little bit worse as it relates to the safety aspects of operating the airport. But at this point, let me turn it over to Bob Bruno, our Director of Engineering, who will go through a very quick presentation, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Chair, would it be okay if I share the screen?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All set? Yep. Good evening. As Kevin stated, my name is Bob Bruno. I'm the Director of Planning, Engineering, and Environmental Services for the CAA. I'm going to give you a brief presentation on the easement acquisition and obstruction removal project at Brainerd Airport. Go ahead, Alex. There we go. As a quick agenda, I'd just like to go through the airspace protection, the clearance easements required, vegetation management, which is basically the techniques that we're going to use to remove the obstructions, a brief project schedule, and then time for any questions that you may have. As Kevin said, the CAA is required by the FAA to keep all airport airspace services clear of obstructions. To date, the CAA has completed obstruction analysis to determine obstructions to the protected airspace services, including a recent update in 2020. We've also completed the required environmental assessments for the obstruction removal. As we discussed, the obstruction removal, the project really includes approximately 33.8 acres of obstruction removal. As we get into further slides, I'll kind of briefly go into the different methods that we're going to use to remove the trees. And the obstructions need to be removed this upcoming winter. As Kevin said, it's a safety issue. So, this slide shows the areas of removal. What we're looking to do is complete the removal in three methods. We have a method of flush cutting, which removes the trees to the top of the stump. Snag cutting, which leaves a section of the tree up approximately 20 feet, and then topping. Those are the three methods that were discussed in this project and embedded through DEP in the permit process. The key to this project is a clearance easements. The CAA would be looking to get 2 clearance easements on 3 tax parcels in the city of Hartford. And the new easement will allow the CAA to remove the current vegetation penetration to the airspace in lieu of the city of Hartford. Currently, the city of Hartford is responsible to remove the trees on the property. This slide shows the one of the clearance easements that we'd be requesting. It's on a city-owned parcel of land in the town of Weathersfield. And the new clearance easements that we'd be requesting would replace the existing easements executed in 1959, which currently requires the city of Hartford to undertake this work at its own expense. This slide here shows the second parcel that we'd be looking for a clearance easement. I just wanted to give you an update where we are with the project to see required permits for the state and DEP and the Army Corps. Pending the easement acquisition and permit approvals, the CA intends to begin the obstruction removal project this winter. A brief schedule. We have here the winter removal is required for various reasons. It's being required by DEP for rare species protection, frozen soils, reduced impacts to non-target vegetation, and an increased percentage of regrowth for the managed trees. Right now, we're in the permitting phase and easement phase. We have applied for the inland wetlands permit and the Army Corps permit, and as well as the Greater Hartford Flood Commission permitting as well. The project is currently bid at this date to be ready to award the project. And the project phase, as far as the time schedule, is highly weather dependent. So we'd be looking to start the project in December, and it would go through March of 2023. So that's a very high level, presentation that we have. So we're here, like Kevin said, we have our team here to answer any questions you may have. I'll go to the next slide. This kind of shows a few pictures of the approaches at the airport. So with that, I'll leave it up to Councilman, any questions you may have.
Okay, if you can, if you could take this off the screen, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna ask my colleagues first, Councilman LeBron.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much. And thank you to the CAA for presenting. So if I'm hearing correctly, the easement is for the removal of vegetation and above ground maintenance?
Yes, it protects the airspace to certain elevations, to certain approach surface elevations, correct.
So so the second question through you, Mr. Chair, there's nothing done underground, correct?
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so I do have several questions. So, I did have conversation with Corporation Counsel because I am concerned about the fact that this is 30 acres of trees that we're talking about. It's not just a few trees. And the fact that we're talking about cutting down silver maples and other trees. Silver maple apparently does grow back again, but I'm not sure about the other trees that you're talking about taken down to the stump. Now, when you explain this, we're talking about a tier like, right? So the forward or the trees closest to the runway will be the ones taken down to the stump, and those further away, you said 15 to 20 feet, and then the furthest ones will be topped off. Is that what you're talking about? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, there's three different methods. You're correct. Some of the trees,
almost like a step.
Yes, the trees further out will be topped, as you said, and the trees closer in will be taken down either to the flush cut or with the snag cut, we call it, with a portion of the trunk remaining, and that's for helps for NDDB review for special species and things like that. So like I said, we tried to work with DEP to help the environment as we're doing this project.
Okay, so my other concern is, was there an environmental impact study? Because, maybe there's not bald eagles there, but we definitely have some bald eagles in the area and other species in that vicinity. Has there been an environmental impact study?
We did the environmental assessment, and we had public hearings on the project and everything. Yeah, so we did take that into account.
Okay, and then now as far as community outreach or a public hearing, has that been exercised?
Yeah, that was all part of the environmental process.
Okay, so All right, I have a question from Councilwoman Rossetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly we want to have a safe airport in our city. But as someone who over the last number of years has become a tree person for good reason and concerned about our tree canopy in the city of Hartford, because urban areas with a bigger tree canopy have healthier residents and everything that goes along with that. When we talk about 30 acres of trees, that puts us backwards on a tree canopy that we've been working hard on in the last, at least the 10 years I know of. We have our city forester here. We have Jack Hale, who I don't even know what to call him because he's just an all-around tree expert. And we have something about tree replacement. And certainly we wouldn't do it to the point because it would be in millions of dollars. But I think there's some reasonable discussions that need to be had on how we do this so we do it in collaboration together. Yes, maples come back and maybe some others, but a lot of trees don't. And we have really spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in the city on trees to build our tree canopy, and this would set us back. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to do it together? How are we going to do it in a timely way? How are we going to have those guarantees that this will happen? And there are eagles there. There are eagles there, and we don't know what else is there. So we want to be a friend of the airport as much as safety-wise, but we need to have what is due us. I see, Councilwoman Hercules says, trees can be replanted via these methods, but, we have questions and we need to feel that we're going to have the correct answers and promises when it comes to tree replacement and how we're going to do that in collaboration with what you have to do. That's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so any questions from my council colleagues? Let me see here.
Yes, Councilman.
Okay, Councilwoman Surgeon.
Thank
Followed
you.
by Council President Rosado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Got a couple of maybe legalese question. I see our attorney, Howard Rifkin, is on the line. Now, apparently when I read the overview, this was an agreement with deed restriction, our deeds warranty back in 1959. If we don't agree to do this, through you, Mr. Chair, to our esteemed attorney, Rifkin, what effect will that be done to the city, since when I read the overview that the city should be the one who's been paid for it, but apparently FAA is paying for it. So that is my question through you, Mr. Chair, to Attorney Rifkin.
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair. Let me just put my video on. Sorry. As Councilwoman Surgeon noted, and was noted previously in 1959, the city issued a warranty deed, which essentially obligated the city to trim and cut trees necessary for safety of flights coming in and taking off from Brainerd Airport. The obligation was in response to federal regulations that required activity, if in fact, or action. If in fact the council ultimately does not approve or entering into these easements, permanent easements with CAA, it's my view that the city would be obligated to not only do the work, but pay for the work. With the execution of these easements to CAA, the FAA, federal government, will ultimately wind up paying for the work that needs to be done. And it is my understanding that the cost is in excess of $1 million.
Thank you. Through you, Attorney. one other question, through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Hale sent us a letter regarding, the issues with the tree canopy. And in his letter that he sent us, he talked about the City of Hartford tree ordinance and how, that affects removal, during development projects. And I see Mr. Hale is on the committee meeting. Through you, Mr. Sanchez, through you, Mr. Chair, is it possible Mr. Hale can explain that to me, because I don't understand
Yes.
what that means?
Yes, Mr. Hale.
Thank you, Chairman Sanchez. The city tree ordinance requires that when trees are removed during development projects, that they be replaced. And the replacement can be done several different ways, but it's based on the idea of what we call an inch for inch replacement. So for instance, if you take down a tree with a trunk diameter of 12 inches, you might replace it by planting 6 trees with a diameter of 2 inches. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way you can do it is based on the appraised value of the tree that's being removed. So it can be done on a dollar basis there. And then the third possibility is if you're looking at the inch for inch replacement, and there is not a way to replace the trees on site, contribution can be made to the Hartford Tree Fund, which supports planting and other forestry activities in the city. And based on the ordinance, that contribution would be $500 per 2 inches of tree.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. I didn't know very much about this, so that kind of helped me. So may I, one more question through you, Mr. Chair, back to Corporation Counsel.
Yes.
We have this warranty deed on our books. Does that override this ordinance that we also have passed by the city? That's number one. And number two, is this a development project?
Well, let me just first acknowledge the work that Jack does, and the Tree Advisory Commission, and the work that Heather does. It's important work. I think that Councilwoman Rossetti expressed it well when she indicated that the tree canopy of Hartford is an important and essential asset to the health and safety of our community. I think we need to look at that, though, in the context of what we're talking about in this case. And that is, it is not, in my view, a development project that would trigger the provisions of the tree ordinance. We are talking about the city currently having, as Councilwoman Surgeon properly pointed out, an ongoing legal obligation to maintain the tree height at a certain level to ensure safety. That's an obligation of the city. That does not go away. What we're doing here is not giving development rights to CAA, but we're giving them an easement to do the work that, in fact, the city is obligated to do. Having said that, I think that Councilwoman Rossetti raises perhaps a policy question or a suggestion, even if there isn't a legal obligation necessarily to replace the trees that are cut. is there some accommodation? Is there some strategy that could be deployed that together between CAA and the city we could come up with, which would, if not fully address the concerns that have been expressed, perhaps there's some common ground that can be found. But to be direct about it, I do not believe that the tree ordinance as it is written applies to the situation that we're talking about with tree cutting on this property adjacent to Brainerd Airport.
Okay, so I have a question for, I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilwoman
I'm
Surgeon.
just going to thank him because it makes me a little bit more knowledgeable. Thank you.
So Attorney Rifkin, I have a question here about the obstruction analysis. Was that shared with your office? The obstruction analysis. I think there's another analysis that was done, Mr. Dillon.
With my office, I mean, I have seen the work. I mean, I didn't analyze it, and I don't pretend to have the skill set necessary to do that. But I know that DPW and the Army Corps of Engineers and the commission has also reviewed all of that. And in fact, at one point, there were conversations with CAA about doing an access agreement. And I know that Mike Looney and his team and folks from CAA actually went on the site and walked it and looked at exactly what needed to be done.
Okay, and now my question is to Director Looney. Can you share any information of your experience with the communication and walking the area, assessing?
Yes, Sharon. I did not actually walk the site myself. Frank Della Ripa, I believe, may have been involved in that site visit. So I would defer to him to talk about specifics of the site.
Frank?
Yes, soon put my screen on. Good evening, everyone. You're looking at my bureau.
Good evening.
I'm here with Nick Casperino and myself, Nick, and I work on the Flood Commission. And that's really where our focus is, really the Flood Commission. And we wanted to make sure in this entire analysis that the access, to the levee system wasn't harmed in any way. We looked for areas for them to access with their equipment to cut the trees. That was really our main focus. So we're good with where they're going to be accessing the levee system to cut those trees.
Okay, so then my next question is to Mr. Dillon and Mr. Bruno. So do you have a plan or a site map as far as identifying the trees that you will be cutting and ripping out or what have you in that 30 acre? I mean, is the land going to look barren after this performance is done?
Sure. As a matter of fact, turn it over. Randy, we have Randy Christensen from Stantec who's prepared the design for that. Randy, would you mind commenting on that?
I'd be happy to, and thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here. I'm actually joining you from Florida, so I'm not going to share my video here, not in an office. So pleasure to meet everybody. My name is Randy Christensen. I'm an environmental scientist with over 25 years of presenting and preparing vegetation management plans for airports, much like Hartford, Brainerd. And the question posed as I hear it was, is it going to be a laid to waste landscape in the post-project condition? And the answer to that is no. In fact, because of the wetland conditions out there, because of the rare species conditions out there, because of the presence of the river out there, we were really shoehorned into only taking what is absolutely necessary to remove the obstructions, number one, and number two, provide only the minimal amount of project longevity. And let me explain that. If we were to cut the trees to the exact elevation of the surface, we would get less than 1 year project longevity out of that $1 million plus project. And so we looked at a tiered effect of cutting, where the ones in closest to the runway ends, we necessarily had to take down to ground level, the target vegetation only, that being the trees. But as we got farther out, we were able to employ other methods that left substantial parts of the trees standing. In fact, the ones across the river and furthest out, only the top leaders of those trees were obstructing the area. So even though they're counted in the 33.8 acres, all we're doing is climbing them, hand labor, and actually professionally pruning those top leaders out of there, allowing the rest of the tree to remain. And so there's a stark difference between a lot of the methods that Bob presented to you earlier, in that much of the area that you see on that original plan that Bob presented in his presentation, much of it will look almost exactly the same. Moved out of some of the trees. But in close, we are cutting to ground level, the target vegetation, with maximum protection of the non-target vegetation, saplings, shrubs, and ground cover. We want all that to remain, and we want that to flourish. Another aspect of this, and I believe Council Chairman may have mentioned this earlier in the discussion, was that floodplain trees, and 90% of what we're cutting out there is silver maple. We have some red maple, we have some green ash, and we have some cottonwood mixed in. But mainly we are talking about the two species of maple as being dominant biomass in our cutting plan. They grow back with robust vigor, no matter what kind of stump you leave, either flush cut or if you leave that snag cut. In fact, almost all the trees that we are addressing with this project were previously cut for airspace protection. If you were to look at the individual trees that we are cutting, you're going to note that they are multiple stemmed. Very few of them are single trunked. Most of them are 4, 5, 6 regrowth trunks out of a single cut stump, dating back to the early 80s when a previous airspace project occurred. That same condition is what is going to result from those flush cuts that are proposed in this current plan. So as with a quote unquote development project where the tree is removed and usually replaced with impervious surface or lawn or something like that, we are temporarily setting back the forest condition to something like it was in the early 80s when the previous cut occurred. So we need to manage the trees, but protect the non-target vegetation, that being those underlying layers. So if you were to go out there on day 2 following the cutting, yes, it is going to be, to the untrained eye, it is going to be a stark contrast to what is there right now. You go out there 3 to 5 years following the cutting, and you're going to be substantial revegetation of those areas. In fact, one of our conditions for the rare species permitting for this project is the replanting of black willow, a native river floodplain species, in a lot of the areas that we are cutting. So we do have a replanting plan to address some of our rare species issues for this project, trying to maximize protection of non-target vegetation and maximize protection of those rare species that we know are out there. And so again, that was a long answer, but the short answer to your question is yes, originally it will be very disturbing to the untrained eye on day 2 following the cutting. However, substantial regrowth occurs in that 3 to 5 year regrowth period where vegetation, 100% vegetation cover will be reestablished at these sites.
Okay, I appreciate that, Mr. Christian. Corporation Counsel Rifkin. My most likely last question. So this agreement is replacing an existing agreement from 1959, correct?
It will, yes, that's correct.
Okay, is there a sunset to this new agreement?
No, as there is no sunset to the 1959 warranty deed.
All right, so what guarantees?
I'm sorry. So over the years, there would obviously be a need for trimming and cutting as Mr. Christensen said, the last cut that was done was sometime in the 1980s. So I don't know over what period of time it would be before another cut would have to be made, but there is no sunset provision in the granting of the easement.
And what now in this agreement, is there a guarantee and assurance that trees will be replanted?
There is no guarantee, and as I stated previously, I don't believe that the provisions of the tree ordinance that require that in development projects pertain here.
Okay, thank you, Howard. Councilwoman Rossetti.
So I'm hearing our Corp Counsel. Thank you, Corp Counsel, and I'm hearing the expert from Florida. Thank you, expert from Florida. And as I stated, we want to have a safe airport in our city. But you know what? We, again, have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on our tree canopy, and this would be putting us backwards. How do we do this as good neighbors? Maybe it's not a requirement, but you know what good neighbors do? Hey, your fence isn't here. Hey, this isn't. Let's discuss it. Let's find some ways to get a guarantee that there will be some type of tree replacement. I think that's the only thing I'm really comfortable with, and I'm just going to put that out there.
Does any of my other council colleagues have any questions, statement? Councilwoman Surgeon, followed by Council President Rosado.
We have on the line Mr. Dillon, and we have also heard from the expert from Florida on trees. So what I did hear him say that you will be replanting some of the trees which are rare species. I think that's what I put in my note real quickly. Would that suffice as to say for the replanting of trees there? And I think you also said that these rare species of trees are more accommodating to the water area where the airport is. Is that correct, Mr. Christian?
May I clarify, please?
Yes, please.
The rare species we're actually protecting are river-associated species of mussels. We also have some rare plants out there. The trees that we are replanting, black willow, is not a rare species, but it is being put out there to make sure that the river buffer and the buffer of the connecting channel to Wethersfield Cove continues to have enough treed area, canopy area to protect the water quality, to protect those rare species that are in the river. And so the trees themselves aren't rare species, but they are protecting rare species.
Sorry, I was quickly taking notes as you were speaking, so thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
So there is going to be some replacement of trees.
That is accurate.
Okay. And I know there was nothing in the resolution requesting our approval, for the easement. So is there anything you can give us in writing regarding, that this will be done? Not that we don't take your word for it, but it was great to have something in writing.
If I may, we do have an official submission to the Connecticut DEP, Inland Wetlands Commission, Inland Wetlands Department, and the Natural Diversity Database, your state rare species staff, an official planting replacement plan that was submitted, and that allowed for the rare species staff to approve the project with conditions and pass it on to the inland wetlands folks. So we do have official, complete, final statements regarding the plantings that we could certainly share with you.
Thank you, Mr. Christian. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Council President Rosado.
So I'm going to make a statement, and I'd like to make a motion. So I would like to, I'll make my motion first. I'd like to make a motion to postpone this item in committee until we get a report or see the report that was just, I believe it was Mr. Collin there that was speaking of what has been sent over to DEEP. It's 30 acres, right? How many trees are going to be cut down, and how we can come to a middle ground where we can get some guarantees of other trees being planted. So that's my motion and my comment.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. A motion been made and properly second to postpone until we get further communication and also information emailed to the city council. Further discussion, Councilwoman Surgeon.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. You know, we have to have some trust in an organization like CAA, you know, that is doing business in our city. And it's certainly, the statement has been made that there is the approval for the replanting, you know, of these trees. So are we postponing this to get that, to see that in writing, to be more specific, before you will approve this at a committee? Is
And
that
I would also like to see a friendly amendment on the resolution based on some of those guarantees and some of those statements that we can take out of what they just stated that was referred over to D.
So the motion is to postpone until we get until we see what was sent to Deep regarding replacement of the trees? Is that the?
Yes,
I'm trying to understand.
The motion is to postpone until we can get the study, the information emailed to us so that we can look at it and then amend.
Do a friendly amendment on the resolution.
Okay, so so can I make a friendly adjustment to that motion by saying that we send this favorably to committee with the understanding that before we vote on it at the next council meeting, we will have this information from Deep.
Council President.
It's up to you, Chair. You have my motion on the floor that has been properly made and properly seconded.
So we do have a motion on the floor that we need to vote on. Are you making another motion, Councilwoman Surgeon?
Well, I was making a friendly amendment to the motion, but since there is nobody to second it, it won't go through.
Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Councilman LeBron, Councilwoman Surgeon?
Nay.
Nay? Okay. Okay, so this resolution and item has been postponed until we receive all the information emailed to us and the studies as well. And then we'll bring it to our next the December 7th PDH meeting. Thank you, everyone. Yes, Council President Rosado.
And I understand that like Councilwoman Surgeon said, right? We want a safe airport. So there is always, you know, the possibility that you as chair can discharge this resolution based on the information that the gentleman's here from CAA can provide us on time. And
absolutely,
we could make that friendly amendment right on the floor. Okay.
Yes. So, Mr. Dillon, do you understand what Council President just mentioned?
In terms of the information that you're looking for, this information has already been provided to your Department of Public Works. They were made privy to the application documents. And I think it's important to understand that we cannot undertake any work out there unless we receive that deep permit and comply with the conditions of the deep permit, of which it would include this limited replanting. I want to make sure it's clear that the replanting that our consultant talked about is not a replanting that would be anywhere near compliance with the tree ordinance, right? It's limited replanting, but I think, the council should feel confident by the fact that we have to receive this permit from DEEP in order to do this work, and we can't do the work unless we comply with all of the conditions that are in that permit. But we can certainly get that to the committee, a copy of what's been submitted for that permit. But as I said, it's been presented to your Department of Public Works. They've been involved in these conversations for quite some time. I think it's also very important for the committee to understand there's a timing element here, right? If the committee postpones action on this, that's going to delay the issuance of the deed permit. And if we miss this winter season that was discussed earlier, that's the only time we can do this cutting, because the ground has to be solid for the equipment to be out there. If we miss that window, you're now talking about another year's worth of growth. That will force us to have to take some very specific action here that unfortunately would accrue to the liability of the city. So I just think that all needs to be understood before you start postponing action on the item.
So just so you understand what Council President was saying, and then I'll let Councilwoman Rossetti speak as well, is that once we receive all the information, and I appreciate that you sent it to DPW, but it wasn't shared with the council, city council. All right. So we have no information on that except for what we heard here on this meeting. So once we receive all of that, I as chair can discharge this resolution to council favorably. So we just need the information and the studies that you stated earlier in this meeting. Councilwoman Rossetti.
And I've got a question after.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, just to be clear, as Councilman Sanchez said, certainly this is the PDH committee, but we are the governing body and we need to have the information. And I'm not saying anybody, there's no reason. And when you say in your statement, defining the limited replacement, that does concern me. So I want to see the information and what limited means. So yeah, we don't want to stand in anybody's way. CAA, we don't want to do that. We want to be good neighbors. I'm a Hartford resident my whole life. The airport has been there. But you know what? I have a responsibility to the citizens of the city of Hartford and the tree canopy, and I'm going to do my job. So we're going to do it together, and we're going to find out that information. So thank you.
Councilman Rossetti. Being that we have no other items on this agenda, I bid everyone a good night. Thank you. And
Director Looney is trying to speak.
I'm sorry. Please, everyone stay on. We have Director Looney. I did not see your hand up.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can have that information to you by the end of the week. We have that information. Had we known that it was going to be a specific item of question tonight, obviously we would have submitted that beforehand, but we can get that to you in very short order.
Okay, Councilman LeBron.
Yeah, I want to echo my colleagues, but Councilman Rossetti in specific. And this is just not to the CAA. This is just a general kind of public service announcement to anyone who comes to our committees in our communities. If folks haven't taken notice yet, we like to be involved. This isn't the first time where we heard a department received information and somehow we are supposed to, because that was received, somehow we are supposed to rubber stamp that. Two things. Number one, none of us are here to do that on council. We weren't elected to do that. So that's the first thing. And so number two is for folks to make intentional efforts to reach out to us respectfully and individually, so that way we can be informed as well. Oftentimes, this governing group right here, for lack of a better word, we don't, how the kids say in the community, we kind of don't roll like that. So please do the due diligence, lobby us. There's governmental affairs, there's people in positions that is their job to reach out to us. This is just not to CAA. Everyone else, at least with this council body, do the due diligence and reach out to us. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure.
Okay, hold on, Councilwoman. Go ahead, Councilwoman Sturgeon.
I just want to clarify that if you when you discharge it from committee, you can't discharge it favorably. Or you can, I just want to make sure.
I understand.
Thank you. So just want to make sure that's understood.
Yes, we have our tree warden, Deanne Heather.
Thank you. I just want to make a note that the species of black willow which has been chosen to be planted on the site, is a better solution in terms of height, because it will only get maybe 30 feet, maximum 60 feet, but I don't think it'll ever get that tall, which is super important given the fact that we have our silver maples and red maples and the height issues that we're dealing with in the conflict of the airspace. So
Thank you for the extra information. Okay, Mr. Hale.
Thank you. I don't want to keep people very much longer, but I would point out that the last time there was an opportunity for the public to hear anything about this as presented by CAA was in 2017. There has been no public discussion since then. And the plan has changed significantly over that 5-year period. It's really time for this thing to be laid out completely so people can look at it. This is the first time I heard anything about this replanting, and I'm not sure what document went to the Department of Public Works. The only one I know about was sent for the consideration by the Flood Control Commission, and it was oriented toward the potential for damage to the dike. And it wasn't dealing with the tree canopy at all, as far as I could tell. So we're kind of in the dark a little bit. And so it would make sense to have a really full presentation of this project so we can see what they're talking about. And just one other thing I want to mention, there's another aspect of the tree ordinance that they may need to comply with here, and that is that anytime a tree that is more than 13 inches in diameter is removed, they need to get a permit for each tree from the city forester. And I don't know how many 13-inch trees there are out there, but I'll bet there's quite a few. So that process still remains to be dealt with. And in the mayor's submission, a resolution, the last paragraph refers to completion of any permit process that's related to this. So I think we may be looking at some additional work there. I understand that it would be good for CAA to be able to move forward this winter. Why it has taken until November for them to come before the city council to take a look at this and make decisions, I don't know. Frankly, what will happen between now and next November, as far as the danger to pilots, I suspect it's trivial. So holding off is not. I don't think is a bad idea, and there's a possibility of getting some really good information and some good feedback in there if we take a little more time.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
the opportunity to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hill. I question for Director Looney, and then I have Howard Rifkin to follow. So, Director Looney, can we have an assessment of the area done as soon as possible, as far as the trees, the shrubs, the rare varieties? Is there a way to have that done with Dion Heather?
Through, I believe we have a lot of information that's been submitted to DEEP and from the CAA that may elucidate all of this. Doing that is not something we could do in a matter of days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Corporation Counsel Howard Rifkin.
Thank you. And I don't want to be argumentative about the application of the tree ordinance, and I don't want to get into a fight with Jack, but I do feel it's important for the members of the committee to understand a couple of things. One is specifically in our tree ordinance, it states that it is subject to all applicable state and federal laws. That's number one. Number two is even if it did apply and there was permitting required, as Jack suggests, which I don't believe is the case, but even if it were the case, I believe that the trees that we're talking about could be considered super hazardous trees, and therefore the permit would not have to be granted. And again, I don't want to get into an argument over the legal application of the authority, but I do want the members of the committee to understand that that Jack's conclusion here may not, in fact, be correct, nor the permit that he talks about be required.
Thank you, Co-Counsel. So any questions or statement from my colleagues, from council members? Okay, there
I
being
just want to
none.
make a comment. Thank you, everyone. This has been a great meeting, very informative. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I now adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Everyone have a good night.
You too.
Good night.